I have finally seen the Fear Street trilogy just in time for Prom Queen. What's going on, guys? I'm Chris, and welcome back to another video. Today I've got my review of Fear Street Prom Queen, the fourth film in the Fear Street series that's now streaming on Netflix. I was able to check it out early, which is why this video is out right when the movie hits Netflix, and I have some thoughts, let me tell you. Before I get into this, hit that like button, subscribe to that notification bell to be notified for all my future videos, and if you want to watch the Fear Street trilogy with me, you can actually do that on my Patreon. I have commentary tracks for the whole thing where you guys sync up and watch the movie with me. I had a blast with that. Feel free to consider becoming a patron today to gain access to those tracks. I also have a commentary track for this movie, Prom Queen. You guys can go watch Fear Street Prom Queen with me right now, so feel free to join the Patreon to do that. All right, so when it comes to the Fear Street trilogy, I dug it. It was my jam. In fact, it's been a couple days since I first watched it, and I'm of the opinion this might be one of my go-to slasher franchises now. My favorite of the three, I'll save for a ranking video coming soon, but they all have their own distinct qualities about them, and what made that trilogy so great was like the in-depth lore and backstory for why these killings were happening, and each movie set in a different time period, having its own little period piece touch to it, was a real unique thing. So coming into Prom Queen, were there pros and cons? Absolutely. I think it is a bit more of a generic slasher, but I'll get into that when I get to the negatives. I'm going to talk about the positives, the pros here. The first and the biggest praise I can give this movie is they nailed the 80s vibe. If you're a fan of all things 80s, this movie will be up your alley in a way because they have a soundtrack filled with basically the greatest hits of the 1980s. Like if you grew up driving around in the car with your mom or dad and they had like a classic hits radio station that played through like best songs of the 80s, that's basically what the soundtrack is, and I'm not mad about it. Every 5 minutes a new banger would play and I'd be like, hell yeah, we're in the 80s, and I bought in. The same can be said for the actual musical score of the film. It was very synthy, reminded me a lot of the music we hear in Stranger Things. It's composed by Kyle Dixon and Michael Stein. In fact, for a minute I was like, are the composers of Stranger Things doing this movie? That's how 80s it felt. On top of that, they nailed the wardrobe, the hairstyle, the look of all these characters. It oozes 1980. So again, if you have some nostalgia for that time period, or if that's just like your favorite time period for movies and music, you will automatically have a little bit more of an interest in this movie, and that's the case with me. I was like a little more engaged just because it was technically an 80s period piece slasher. And much like the Fear Street trilogy, this movie also pays homage to slashers from that era. Now, it's no secret I'm not the biggest fan of all the popular slasher franchises, but just like in the trilogy with Prom Queen, there are undeniably references to movies like Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street. All the big hit slashers, whether it's the way the killer stands, whether it's, you know, the way a certain kill is shot, there are homages and references to the slashers that clearly influenced the Fear Street movies. So again, if you're a fan of just the slasher genre, there will be entertainment for you here. It's a slasher, so I gotta talk about the kills. There were some pretty cool ones here. They were bloody, limbs were flying around, a lot of limbs in this movie. They went for it. I would say of the four movies, this one might have the second most kills. I'd have to rewatch the whole trilogy, but I'd say this one probably number 2 if we're ranking them straight up by kills, which is a big thing when it comes to slashers. You want to see some blood, some carnage, you're gonna get that here. It's gonna take a while to get going, about 30 minutes, but once it ramps up, it's game on. And since this is a bit disconnected from the Fear Street trilogy, you've got a new lead character in Laurie Granger, and they do a good job of setting her up, establishing a very clear backstory that plays a role in the overall narrative, so you know where she's coming from in her past, demons, if you will. She is a character that's pretty easy to root for, and her friendship with the character Megan was the highlight when it comes to character relationships in this movie. It goes without saying, this movie is set on prom night as a prom queen is going to be picked, and that is sort of the main setup for the movie. In many ways, it's kind of a one-location slasher, which works to its benefit. It adds to the tension and really amps up the mystery surrounding the whodunit of it all. You know, in many ways, slasher movies are like R-rated episodes of Scooby-Doo, where you're just trying to figure out who's behind the mask, and so the whole time, the movie will keep you guessing for a good bit. Now, I do think this is probably one of the weaker, if not the weakest, entries, and the main reason for that as I transition into the cons is it's surprisingly pretty basic. It's a very generic slasher. Like, you've kind of seen this movie a million times, and it doesn't have that backstory or rich lore that the first three movies have that really elevate them. This, on the other hand, it's kind of a slasher you've seen before. In many ways, it's formulaic. You've got a group of people who you're suspecting the killer could be, and it's likely going to be one of them, so it's not some crazy jaw-dropping reveal when it happens. I kept waiting for something to make this movie stand out, and it never really did that. It just kept following the basic beats of a slasher movie, which was upsetting because, again, I adored the Fear Street trilogy because it felt so original and fresh, giving us this expansive backstory with Sarah Fier, the Good family, all these different elements were at play that made it more than just a dude behind a mask killing people, and that's kind of what this movie plays out like in the end, which was upsetting. Outside of Laurie and Megan, a lot of the characters I did not feel any attachment to, didn't have a reason to care about them. They were kind of just the stereotypical high school jock, the high school couple, the high school goober or nerd that just get picked off one by one. Once some major reveals happened in the third act, I couldn't help but step back and say, wow, that was a little bit underwhelming, and this movie does one of my least favorite things that a slasher film will do, where there's like a fake out resolution. And a lot of horror movies do this too, where it feels like, you know, we're winding down, that's the movie, and then boom, here's a quick little fourth act for you guys. Out of nowhere, this character shows up, and the movie almost gets prolonged because of that. That always frustrates me, and I feel like they do it for the worse here. Obviously, I'm not spoiling what happens, but if you've seen the movie, you might know what I'm talking about. So all in all, I'm glad this movie was made. I hope they make Fear Street movies to the end of time, because that trilogy was awesome, and this is a fine little one-off movie, but when I'm comparing it to the others, it's definitely a step down, as it's way more generic, formulaic than the other three. The characters aren't as likable or easy to root for, and the reveals just aren't as surprising. A lot of that because this movie lacks a real great backstory or, like I said, a lore for the reasoning behind the killings. It's kind of just, oh, that's it? All right. It's enjoyable enough. If you like slashers, you'll get a kick out of it for sure, but it doesn't hold a candle to the trilogy in my opinion, and when it boils down to it, there are other more recent slasher films that I'm gonna go to over Prom Queen. I'm looking at Thanksgiving, I'm looking at Hard Eyes from earlier this year. I think they do something a little more fresh, and this concept can only be done so many times without feeling recycled, and here, it just isn't the freshest it's been when it comes to slashers. Again, entertainment value, but there are much better slashers in recent memory. But that does it for my honest thoughts on Fear Street Prom Queen. Stay tuned for my ranking of all 4 Fear Street movies coming very soon. You're not gonna wanna miss that. Of course, hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And if you wanna watch Fear Street Prom Queen and the whole trilogy with me via commentary tracks, you guys can join my Patreon and get access to that immediately, along with all my other content over on Patreon. Lots of exciting things coming this summer. But that's gonna do it. Thank you guys, as always, for watching, and until next time, I'll see you guys later.